You're listening to the Business Mike podcast. Amazing interviews with entrepreneurs and industry thought leaders.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business Mike podcast. Joining me today is Andrew. Andrew, can you let the audience know a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Thank you very much for having me, Dowdy. My name is Andrew and I am in corporate training by profession, and I do a lot of leadership advocacy, particularly around millennial leadership advocacy, and I find myself involved with also a little bit of TEDx coaching here and there just to keep me on the go when I do what I do. Right.
And Andrew, I'd love to know, for someone in your position, you must have been on some sort of journey to get you to where you are today, to do the things that you're doing. Can you just paint a picture as to how you found yourself where you are right now?
It's fascinating because there are different facets to where I am right now. But I think the one that might be relevant to your audience is just unpacking the journey to developing myself into a better leader and a better communicator, which is what I use particularly as my core skills in serving the community and the corporate audience that I work with. And it started off, I always say it's really started off from my younger days when I was growing up and in school. I found myself being involved in leadership opportunities, pursuing them right up to I finished school and I studied, and I still find myself interested and participating in leadership development programs that were happening around me until I got involved in Toastmasters, where it really bolstered my leadership development and, of course, my communication skills, such that I realized there was value in imparting them out there, and people were seeking some of those skill sets that I actually had. And so that's how it all built up together to ensure that ultimately I am potentially the better communicator and better leader that I am today. And I'm imparting and facilitating those skills to other people who are in need of those.
All right. Now, you mentioned Toastmasters there. I'm sure some of the audience right now are wondering what that is. Is it a place where you toast and have cocktails, or those are some of the thoughts that come to mind. So what exactly is Toastmasters?
In addition to toasting and having good times, Toastmasters is a world leader in communication and leadership development. It's a global nonprofit organization dedicated to helping men and women from all walks of life, from all professions, to develop their communication and leadership skills, resulting in greater self-confidence. Truly, we find that many people have this, what we call a fear of public speaking or glossophobia, and if they don't find a space where they can walk out of that fear, or they can step out of that fear, there are opportunities to develop in whether in their career or in their personal lives. They are stunted as a result of that. And so Toastmasters comes in to help these particular individuals to find their confidence, to be able to communicate and relate with a particular audience, so much so that they can be able to develop their career and or improve in their personal lives, so that they can also achieve their personal best. And that's what Toastmasters is all about, where people develop their confidence in public speaking, communication, and leadership skills.
Right. And actually, that's the reason why I wanted to have you on as a guest, is because most of the guests I have and the circles within which we operate are leaders and professionals in the corporate world who oftentimes find themselves giving presentations, impromptu speeches, and things of that nature. And every now and again, you find yourself caught off guard when you make a presentation that doesn't hit the mark or doesn't communicate to the audience in a way that you thought it would, or perhaps you just put on the spot and you asked to talk about something and you struggle to find the words or articulate it in a very meaningful way. So as someone who's been coaching people in the corporate world, what are some of the errors or things to look out for that we can help improve ourselves on?
I think various components add up to what is a resonant presentation or speech or talk whenever we have an opportunity to deliver that. And I always say the most important thing to learn is whenever you're invited to present something or to say something, you are meant to think of yourself as a server, somebody who serves the audience with something. And I always give the analogy that think of yourself as a waiter. and people walk into your restaurant, or patrons walk into your restaurant, and as a waiter, you've got to ask and find out what the audience needs before you just deliver that. And so a lot of times when we get opportunity to speak, it's because also there's a particular need within the audience that you are seen as somebody who's able to fulfill. Do you know what that need is? In other words, Simon Sinek says, do you know the why that you are in that space? Why are you asked to speak? Why are you going to be sharing your time and your valuable insights? Why? And once we're able to identify that, I think we would have covered the foundation of a great speech that builds rapport. Knowing your audience is about understanding your role in that particular space. Some people are invited to inform or teach. And so you've got to honor that responsibility that you're there to inform or you're there to teach. Some people are invited to speak because they're invited to entertain. If you invite a person like Trevor Noah to your year-end function, surely you're not inviting him to sell you, life insurance or anything along those lines. You are inviting him to entertain you on a particular topic, on a particular subject. And so it's important that Trevor knows that his responsibility when speaking is to entertain. And of course, when you are a leader, too often your role is to inspire, is to leave people motivated and inspired. And so it's also important for you to then recognize that responsibility. The second thing that I always say is important in being able to resonate with your audience, and that I find a lot of professionals missing the mark, is thinking that utilizing the best English vocabulary they have is the best way to connect and communicate their intelligence. It's not about you. It's about the audience. Come down to their audience level. I refer to an experience when I was participating in one Zambia Farmers Day luncheon that was hosted, and they invited this particular marketing manager to come and speak to these farmers. Excited, these farmers, over 200-300 of these farmers were in the room, and at this point in time when the speaker comes to speak, he starts speaking about brand equity, brand maximization. And do you think that farmers understood what he was talking about? No, because the only branding they know is to say, that is my cow and that is my, my flock. And so it's important for us to always remember that whenever we are speaking to people, we've got to understand at what level they are at and speak to that level. It's not about you. It starts with you. And that's where the resonance comes from. And lastly, I think it's always ultimately important for you to always think about, what outcome do you want to have? What do you want me to do? Now that you've told me or you've inspired me to act, what do you want me to do with the inspiration that I have? And so there's always an outcome. And sometimes you get into a conference and then you wonder, this person was speaking so beautifully. Great things that this person said. She was spot on. But I don't know what to do next. And so the idea of always having that idea of a call to action in short, but in essence of what actions you want the audience to take after listening to you is important for many speakers. And I think a lot of professionals miss the mark of moving their teams, moving their organizations forward, because they miss out on, number one, the purpose, which is the why they are speaking, the core of what it is. Secondly, they miss the mark because at that point in time when they're communicating, they're not speaking to the audience indirectly. They are speaking to themselves, or they don't realize that. And lastly, they don't at an end point identify that whenever they are communicating, they need to be able to resonate and relate, and how they can do that. And so it's important for us to always think along those lines. I hope that answers the question. I could go on and on. I've got verbal diarrhea when it comes to this particular engagement.
No, I love what you've said about understanding your audience and having a call to action. And immediately as you're speaking, what came to mind were two scenarios for a manager. One scenario when he's talking to his junior staff, perhaps there is a change. Maybe it's a new software that the company has decided to use. Now, communicating that to the subordinates in a way that will have them embrace this new technology and give up on the old one positively without resisting. I think what you said there hits the nail on the head in terms of having a call to action, understanding their needs and wants, and communicating that in a way that's positive. And on the flip side, if the same manager is communicating to the bosses, and maybe they want a budget for something, they need to explain it in a way that the boss understands that, look, this will make you money in this way, in a clear way that they can appreciate and understand,
Right.
give them the go ahead. So I think you've explained that perfectly well in terms of communicating clearly to your audience and meeting their needs. Maybe the other question that comes to mind following that is the fact that when we're making these communications, sometimes the structure matters. Oftentimes you'll find yourself speaking and you only make the point in the last 1 minute after 15 minutes. So the whole 14 minutes was just waffle without necessarily making sense. So what are some of the tips in terms of packaging a communication? Is there a formula that you can use to make sure that your presentation or speech or communication is well structured in a way that hits the point?
Perfectly said. And I think speaking to that, it's one of the most critical elements. It's not sometimes where structure is important. It's a critical element. If you don't have structure, your audience will not be able to follow your message. And when they are unable to follow a message, they are unable to take action. Remember, whenever we communicate, there is a particular output that we want. And so that output is like the destination. But you've got to be able to take people from where they are to that destination. And the route you take from where they are to the destination is what we consider the structure. And for me, I always think about it from a different angle. There's always reasonings behind how we approach structure. There is a chronological structure. Chronological structure is one way you talk about it from a particular point. If I would take you back to 1996, when my journey started, I was able to do 1, 2, 3. And at that point in time, I was also able to recognize that in 2000, my journey took a different notch and we're able to work from that particular perspective. And then in 2005, this is where we took the next step. And so that is the chronological structure where it takes somebody from 1996 and they're able to follow through right until they get to 2023. Whereas in another setting, it can be a cause and effect particular approach where you're looking at, for us to be where we are today, let's take a look at what started this or what caused the situation that we find ourselves in. And so we unpack the root cause of a particular situation until we get to a point where we speak about it, when we realize, all right, we are here and this is what caused about it. It caused the situation and this is our next step. That's another structure approach that you can take. In other spaces, you'll find yourself needing to then look at your structure from a point of how did we potentially come full circle? And so there's a point system where you talk about it. There are 5 points that we need to look at. And so you're able to take the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth point in order to set that tone. And so all these elements are critical and important for us to be able to identify. Now, when you're looking at the structure, for me, you've always had opening, body, and conclusion. I always think about it with making sure that there are 3 elements involved. Number 1, the logic. Right? What logic, what data, what statistics, what figures supports the specific purpose that you want us to adopt, right? Secondly, what are your credentials in this? Why are you the one speaking to us? What makes you, a unique representative of the message that you want to build in? Why can't I just read about it on Wikipedia and be good about it? What makes you a credible source? If we were in a religious setting, we would say, what's your testimony on this particular topic, right? And then the third element that you need to ensure is always included there is the YFM. What's in it for me? As the audience, what's in it for me if I adopt the approach that you're talking about? Now, let's give it a quick example. I want to persuade the audience to start wearing spectacles. I want to persuade the audience to start wearing spectacles. So the logic part of it would say, and an example would be, I read that in Forbes magazine, the August edition, 90% of people who wear spectacles were considered to be intelligent and were first in line from a first impression to get a promotion in their company. Forbes researched this and they put this in their August magazine. Now, that's the logical aspect. You're bringing in a statistic that is researched by a reputable source. you can imagine what would happen if that statistic was coming from a non-reputable source. Think of your gossip, media in your local countries. If we replaced Forbes with that gossip media company, would you still adopt and think that that statistic would be true? So you want to also make sure that your data and your statistics are backed up by reputable sources. The second element that I spoke about is your credentials. Now, when I look back in my life, even from tertiary school right up to the first and second employment opportunities I had, I recognized that whenever we went for interviews, they used to consider these people the smarter ones because they wear spectacles. In fact, come to think of it, even in school, we had that perception that somebody who wears spectacles, we even called them nerds. And so I think this is actually true, that people who wear spectacles are considered to be smarter than us who don't. Now, that's the second element. I'm sharing my experience. And as I share my experience, I'm actually taking you into your own household, into your own experience at work, at school, to think about, did we have such people who wore spectacles? Did I ever consider some people as nerds? And lastly, ultimately, the what's in it for me. I'm asking yourself, so if you want to be considered intelligent, if you want to be considered smart, if you want to then be in line for a promotion and not be governed by a halo effect, then I suggest that tomorrow find your way into a local pharmacy and just buy any reading glasses, any spectacles, and you will be then considered intelligent. And again, like I said, make sure, as Forbes has written, 90% of people who wear them are considered intelligent. I have experienced it in my work and in my tertiary school. So it is now in your hands for you to consider wearing spectacles. And that's where that whole three process comes in. I could start with my experience and then bring in the logic and then bring in the what's in it for you. Or I could start with the what's in it for you, bring in my experience and back it up with logic. However I go about it needs to be in line with the type of audience I'm engaging with. I hope that gives you an answer in terms of the structure element around it.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because all I'm hearing for my audience, so on behalf of them, is when you're speaking to an audience, you need to have the logic. So in the corporate world, those are your hard stats, be it from the competition or a research article, whatever it is. Bring in your personal experience. That could be the organization's experience or a competitor's experience who's gone through the same, leveraging the facts, and then the what's in it for you. That's the selling point. So if we adopt this, or if we take on that, this is what's in it for us. So that's brilliantly covered. That's exactly what I've taken from that. And I'd now like to turn gears and take us back to what you said at the beginning. As you're introducing yourself, you mentioned that you're a TEDx coach.
Right.
Now, I know of TED, and I'm sure everyone listening and watching knows what TED is. Those are the talks that we see on YouTube and elsewhere. So I'd like to know from you what exactly that entails. What does a TEDx coach do? What do you help people achieve?
I'm a bit of a unique TEDx coach in the sense that anyone who comes to work towards a TEDx coach doesn't necessarily ultimately get to then work with me in that setting, because I'm a bit of a maverick in how I approach a TEDx talk. My interest whenever somebody comes up with a TEDx talk, so let's look at the initial concept of the TED Talks. The initial concept of a TED Talk is, what's that great idea that you want the rest of the world to know and, adopt? And I have always stuck to that one as the core concept of why somebody gives TEDx talks. Now I find more TEDx talks are more TED talks are more inspirational, aspirational, general knowledge. But I still stick to the core of what is that one idea that you want the audience to take. Now it's different from a keynote, because in a keynote you can just share insights and that's it. It's different from a masterclass. In a masterclass you can just teach, that's it. It's different from an interview talk, because in an interview talk, it's conversational and that's it. But when it comes to a TED Talk, my question for you is, what is that one movement that you want people to adopt and run with. Think of the movement that we've had that have made prominence across the world, whether it's the Black Lives Matters or Fees Must Fall that we've seen in different parts of the world. That's a movement that you want people to adopt and work with. Now, in your case, when you are coming off as an aspiring TED Talk or you've been selected to give a TED Talk, typically the first process that you and I would have to undergo is being able to clarify on the movement that you want people to do. Because I believe a TED Talk or an opportunity to give a TED Talk is an opportunity to launch a particular movement that will shape the narrative of the world, that will shape the actions that people will take on from there, versus just a talk where it's no different to speaking on another stage at a conference. A TED Talk is about one movement that you want people to adopt and be able to run with. And that's my sticker towards that particular approach. I hope that gives context to the difference between the two.
Yeah, it does, because I was going to follow up and ask you what the difference between a TED Talk and an ordinary speech or an interview is, and you've brilliantly highlighted that. So from your perspective, do you find that the people that approach you have the idea, or how much work is there in finding that idea worth sharing? How easy is it to find that nugget, or is it a lot of work?
There's no one approach that works for everybody. What I do know is our minds are very brilliant, capacity of, they've got brilliant capacities to be able to, imagine and then break down something into something that's actionable. And so what I find is from different types of people, some people come in whenever they need help. They come in because just getting to articulate their idea is the difficult part. They've got the idea, but then articulating it becomes the difficult part. So they can tell me a whole story about what they're looking for. And my role in that particular point is to help them streamline it and then clarify it so that it's synthesized for an audience reception. Other people have got great ideas, but that is not necessarily a movement. And so they need to streamline it to a movement, or we need to identify a movement. And other people generally don't even have the idea. They don't even have the concept. They just had an opportunity because of great work that they did. And so we need to now come to a point where we unpack that process and then be able to work that in. And so it really depends with the timeline and the time frame that we have. Typically, it takes us about 3 months to be able to land a perfect TED Talk that also resonates, but also speaks to the core. But sometimes you can be able to do it within 2 months or in 1.5 months, particularly if you already have a clear idea or a clear movement that you want to rally people towards. And all we are doing is to now clarify it and synthesize it for an audience reception. So there are differences in the way you approach it and align with it. And it's part of the good part of the work, the challenging aspects of identifying what my role is in each of these experiences.
Yeah, you're playing a very big role, because everyone you help has an idea that they've shared with the world, and that in turn has an effect on the world. So each and every one of your clients is actually having a major impact on the world. So kudos to you for that. Earlier you mentioned Toastmasters and how it helped you develop leadership skills. You are in a very powerful position within Toastmasters, particularly in Southern Africa, where you're based. You're the CEO of your region. That's a very big role. And I've been to Toastmasters, and those who have attended a few of these talks know that they're people of all types of ages. Now, the position you hold means that you have to work with people that are older than you, that have different perspectives that you have. Maybe the ideas you have don't necessarily rhyme with theirs. So what lesson have you learned in being in a position like that at your age, handling and working with people that are older than you and diverse from you?
Right. I think the first lesson I've learned that I cherish the most is recognizing that a team is more than a collection of people. It's an emotional force rooted in the thoughts, in the feelings, and in the actions of each and every individual member towards a particular common goal. And so in my role, one of the things that I found to be very critical and important to recognize is that I am not the team and the team is not me. A team is only complete when the puzzle is complete. Each piece has a role to play. Others are corner pieces, others are center pieces, and all that is important. A centerpiece cannot be a corner piece. A corner piece cannot be a centerpiece. And so that understanding that you're working with a team and you want to be able to work through that is critical. And utilizing that, I also recognize, and you will notice that my theme is about redefining leadership in Africa. And the idea behind the theme of redefining leadership in Africa is that, when I walk into a boardroom and they look at this 27-year-old young man and they're thinking, how did this happen that you are looking after 12 Southern African countries, or you're serving these particular constituencies and, corporate organizations? It's because for a whole while, we've looked at leadership as something that's an age parameter. There's an age parameter to it. We even have people who question it because of racial elements, because there's a racial element to it. And there's a social status that you've got to care for leadership. And so I always challenged that and brought it in after some research that I did. And I realized there's need for us to redefine leadership. And I always say it's similar to looking at the rainbow. When you look out of the window and you look at the rainbow, I think we don't admire it because it has, it's in one shade. Imagine if the rainbow had one shade of color. If it was all white, would we still admire it? No. Could we still admire it if it had just two? Maybe not, maybe. But we admire the rainbow because of the variant colors that it displays. We don't even know those colors. We don't even understand what they represent or how they come to be. But what we do is we recognize the beauty of it. Do we have such of a rainbow in our boardrooms? Do we have millennials in that room, or are we busy criticizing millennials? And if it's a millennial startup, do we have advisors who are in baby boomers or who are Generation X, who then help us to build that in? Is our boardroom all male or all female? Because if we are only chasing a particular narrative that is segregating or prejudiced against other demographics, then our boardrooms are not benefiting from the best of all parts of the world, because our community or the universe that we serve is universal. That means it caters for every particular individual from any walk of life. And so the more representatives you've got of those different paradigms or demographics, the more we are able to make decisions and or influence the rest of the world or the rest of our industries in line with what actually the industry looks for, because we work with what we see. There's a saying by Simon Sinek that I like that says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And there speaks to why are we there? Why are we as leaders? And that's where my role has given me the opportunity to understand that a team as diverse as it is not just a collection of people. It's the emotional forces from different angles, and we are all puzzle pieces, then work towards one approach. And I hope that gives you a context of a day in my life across my role.
It absolutely explains it. I'm very envious of you, by the way. That sounds like a colorful life that you're living, if I could use those words. Andrew, before well, it comes with challenges, but in those challenges comes growth, definitely. True. So, Andrew, this has been a wonderful conversation. I know I could go on and on with you, but we're coming towards the end of the discussion here. And just before we let you go, what parting words would you share with everyone that's watching and listening that they can take away from this discussion?
I think the parting words that I would love to share speak to our role as individuals within a community. As people, we are considered to be gregarious. We affect one another. And so I want us to challenge ourselves to be conscious of how we affect one another. There's a saying in a poem by Marianne Williamson, which says, the poem starts with our deepest fear, and many people would know it. But there's a part on it that says, when we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. But I want to always challenge people to consciously let their own light shine. And how do we do this? We do this by not allowing ourselves to play small. So I always say, there's no passion to be found in playing small, just as Nelson Mandela would always say. But importantly, in whatever room you walk in, make heads 10. Whether it's the aura that you bring or the words, the value of your words that you echo, and or the presence that you bring as a leader by the inspiration and the representation that you bring. Make heads 10 and make sure the earth records your footprint every single day of your living, because somebody out there is looking up to you, looking towards you for inspiration and guidance. And I think you owe it to the rest of the world, just as you draw inspiration from other people, to make heads 10 and for the world to record your imprint. Don't play small.
Well said, Andrew. Well said. Before we let you go, how can people get in touch with you? I know people will want to reach out and learn more about what you do. So do you have a website? Are you online anywhere? How can we learn more about yourself?
So I am online. You can find me on various social media, LinkedIn being one of my most active spaces. So you can find me Andrew Tsuro on LinkedIn. You should be able to identify me. You can also check on my website, www.andrewtsuro, my name and surname.com. And there you'll also find a bit of my works and just engaging me with that. I look forward to connecting with people who are also working towards redefining leadership in whatever space they are in.
Right. Well, Andrew, I can't thank you enough for sharing everything. Every little nugget of your discussion here has stuck with me, and I'm sure I'll be watching this recording over and over again. And I'll certainly try and have you on the show again, because I'm sure there's a lot more to unpack from yourself, and with the developments you would have had between now and then, I know we'll definitely benefit from that. So thank you so much, Andrew, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure to be engaging with you. You're such a great host, and I really appreciate the interaction that we had. And I am crossing fingers for that callback.